Welcome, Bonnie, to the Happier at Work podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to have you with me today. We actually connected through a previous guest of the podcast, Dan Norenberg, and he connected us. We had a wonderful conversation during the summer, and I appeared on your podcast last week as we're discussing now. We recorded it last week, and I'm so excited to have you on my podcast today. Would you like to introduce yourself to listeners, give a little bit of a flavour of your history and how you got to where you are today?
Yes, love to. Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here and thrilled to work with you again. So I'm looking forward to having you on, getting you out there in the public on my podcast as well. So I am Bonnie Hagemann. I'm the CEO of EDA. We are a human capital and tech firm, sorry. And we've actually been in business since 1982. So we're not a startup. We were founded by the chief learning officer at Xerox, and
Wow.
he left. His name is Jim Bolt. He left there to start EDA, which was originally named Executive Development Associates. And we've been doing top of the house, custom executive development, C-suite coaching, board work, all of that since the early 80s. And we also do something that not a lot of people know that are not in the executive development world, but we do trends in executive development research. And that is used all over the world by companies as a benchmark report to check how they're doing and also to look at what the trends are, what's coming. So we're really into watching, the landscape and working with companies to figure out what we need in our leaders in the next 2 to 3 years, and how do we prepare them. So, the landscape shifts so quickly, we don't have to go out 10 years, we just have to go out a few years.
That's so interesting, especially speaking to someone like me with a research background. I'm total research and data nerd. I love watching out for those kind of trends and things. It's really interesting as well what you say, that it's kind of like 2 to 3 years out rather than waiting 10 years for something to come down the line. And maybe we start there. Like, what are the big trends that you're seeing, especially with COVID? Like, what are the big trends that you're seeing that are happening already at that level?
Yes, and that's a great place to start because so that we have the trends available. If your listeners would like to get the summary of that, you can purchase the whole trends report on Amazon, but you just search my name, Bonnie Hagemann, you'll find it there. And then, we'll be happy to give you a summary, and that's no charge. And so basically, what the big trends are, well, let me back up. We intentionally bumped up the research and did it during COVID.
Yeah.
So we thought we have to capture what's
That
going
makes
on
total
and what
sense.
this is
Yeah.
going to have, what impact this is going to have. So what we learned is that, for one thing, we really have to stop and think more. During COVID, we had to act.
Yeah.
But what we learned is that was sort of one of our top researchers said, the sim of all sims. Her name is Tracy Clayton, and she's our head of executive development. And she said, sim of all sims, meaning simulation of all simulations, although it wasn't a simulation, at least we don't think it was a simulation, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, what she said is, like when we're trying to develop people, sometimes we'll do simulated activities in a safe place for them to learn. So we might create a whole simulation, like, for example, let's say we're working with Walmart and we wanted to practice opening a new country. So we're going to practice going into China, and we're going to do that in a simulated environment and practice it based on what we know from opening in other countries, which probably wouldn't work in China, but we try, we do the best we can.
Yeah.
So you try to simulate what you think is going to happen.
Yeah.
And so in a simulation, at the end of it, you can look at your leaders and say, okay, what did we learn?
Yeah.
What did we learn about their skills, their capabilities, the way they think, all of those things. And so you learn a lot from that experience, and then you know how to help your leaders develop. So by calling it the sim of all sims, what she was saying is, hey, let's stop now. Let's take a look at what we learned.
Yeah.
Like now we really got to see what we have. And what a great time to evaluate our leaders and say, and not evaluate them like, oh my God, like they're not working. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that what a great time to figure out what they need. And to help them to develop into what the company needs. And in some cases, of course, it did reveal that they might not be the right fit. But in most cases, we just learned that we have some gaps.
And what would you say then are the biggest gaps that were identified from the trends?
Well, we continue to see this visionary leadership. We continue to see empowerment being an issue. We focus on some of those critical thinking pieces, that higher level cognitive readiness is what we call it, which is it's when you get beyond basics. So basic critical thinking, for example, is when you can put a spreadsheet on the wall, throw a problem at it, and start working through it in a systematic way.
Yeah.
Right? It was working and now it isn't. So we have, a divergent, or we want to do some creative problem, our basic critical thinking.
Yeah.
But cognitive readiness is beyond basic. And what that is when there is no right answer, that the questions are coming so fast you can hardly keep up.
Yeah.
And the stakes are high. That maybe it's going to cost, $40 million, and then you have a team of lawyers looking at it for years if you don't get it right.
Yeah.
And so, it's cognitive readiness means you have to be preparing mentally, and you have to be mentally strong, and you have to be mentally resilient. And all of those things require us doing the work ahead of time in order to be ready.
That makes total sense. And especially in light of COVID and in light of what has just happened, like it has had a huge impact on people from a mental health perspective, from a personal perspective, from a business perspective. Like there's been this huge, huge impact. And I think it's kind of bringing this concept of resilience to the fore, but it's not something that we necessarily had planned for in advance. So I'd love to get your thoughts on preparing for that sense of mental toughness and how people can actually do that. How can people prepare for that kind of thing in advance?
Yeah, so, there are lots of ways to prepare. One of the things to do is, you have to set your mindset, for example, that I'm not going to be weak. I'm going to be a leader. I'm going to be the kind of person who steps in the gap when there is one. And so mindset is probably the first and primary thing. A lot of people don't do discipline on their mindset as much as they do other areas.
Yeah.
And that's probably backwards from what we should do.
Yes. Yeah.
Choosing how we do our mindset is critical. And, I choose, for example, that every day I will get up and bring my A game.
Yeah.
Regardless of how I feel.
Yeah.
Every day I will show up and give 100% effort. So I don't give myself the luxury of a bad day. And that's one of the first things I do when I'm coaching. Now I'm retiring from coaching. We have lots of great coaches. Other people can do it. But I've coached over 200 CEOs and C-suite leaders. And one of the first things I would always say is don't ever give yourself the luxury of a bad day.
Yeah.
Like that's a luxury. You have to show up every day. Yeah. Everyone's looking.
Yeah.
And so, they need you to
whatever
show up. Doesn't mean we don't want you to be fake. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not a fake kind of a person. I'm very, that's one of the comments people make about me. I'm very genuine, but I just don't let myself show up that way. I show up as a leader that says, hey, I may not know the answer, but we're going to figure it out. We'll figure it out together.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes total sense. And for me, mindset, definitely, it's hugely, hugely important. My coaching background, I suppose it's something I've learned over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, the importance of that mindset. And I love this idea of having a choice. And when I talk about imposter syndrome, I always talk about, well, you have a choice here. You can listen to what that voice is saying that is trying to prevent you, is trying to help you in some way. but it's trying to protect you from danger, but it's keeping you stuck where you are. But you have a choice as to whether to listen to that or whether to listen to it and take action anyway. And so I love this idea of not having the luxury of a bad day, choosing how we think. And it's about this idea of discipline. And I know certainly at the start of the pandemic, when I was speaking with leaders about these kinds of topics and resilience, like the kind of things I shared with them would be around discipline versus self-compassion and finding that balance. Sometimes we show ourselves too much self-compassion, that we're actually letting ourselves away with having, exactly as you say, the luxury of a bad day, versus being sometimes a little bit too disciplined. But I do like this idea of showing up in an authentic way, but as that leader, as that strong leader, and bringing your A game. So I really, really like that idea.
Absolutely. You know, people need leadership. They need it. And you know, there's other things we've learned in the pandemic, and I do want to share a few more of the trends too. But another thing that I think became really clear during the pandemic is we're herd animals.
Okay.
You know, and I don't mean that, and I don't want to offend anybody religious. I have faith background. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about evolution or any of that. What I'm talking about is we need each other.
Yeah.
And we are herd animals in that we feel safer in the group.
Yeah.
And when when people talk about fight or flight and our limbic brain system, it's when we are afraid, usually we don't feel like we've stepped out of the herd.
Yeah.
And we're feeling vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why leadership is hard. Visionary leadership is hard because you have to step out of the herd.
Yeah.
And
you have to be.
It causes our brain to start screaming.
Get back. It's this, like, what's popping up for me as you talk about that is this idea of belonging, you know, and wanting to belong. And we're social creatures. We want to be associated with other human beings. And exactly as you're describing, if you want to be a visionary leader, you're taking that step which sets you apart from other people. Now, in the title, I would assume that the idea being that you want to have other people following you because you're setting this clear vision, but to take that initial step, I think is probably quite difficult. Do you want to share a little bit more about that, or will we talk about some of the other trends?
Yeah, well, both. I can do both. So, you know, visionary leadership, it's not leadership if no one's following.
Yes.
So, like with the CEO, what I tell them is, and we have a book about this, by the way. It's called Leading with Vision. It came out in 2017, and so, but still has great info about this. So, what we learned in this process of studying this is that the CEO has to set the vision at a high level, and we call it half baking it.
Yeah.
Right? You have to half bake it. So you do not have to have all the answers. You shouldn't have all the answers. Don't try to give them the full plan. Come up with this is where we're going to lay the tracks. So I did this with my own company. So what I decided back in 2012 was that we would begin to build technology. And I started that initially with 2 companies, thinking I was Elon Musk or something, and I decided that I wasn't. And so we put them together. And so at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, we said, okay, this is EDA, we've got it all in one place, and we are going to become a tech company with services instead of a service company 100%.
Okay, yeah.
So I had to set the vision, and I said, you know, now we're going to take all of this human capital, knowledge, skills, experience that we have over 3 decades, and we are going to put that into the technology. We are going to help these companies. We're going to equip them. And we're going to equip them to see their culture, to be able to develop their people, to be able to shape their culture. And so that's just one of the technology products that is actually rolling out in February. This one will help companies to see the culture, leaders to be able to create a conducive environment, the board members to be able to hold leadership accountable, the investors to be able to vote with their pocketbooks, and even potential employees to be able to see the culture so they can decide whether or not they want to join.
Yeah.
So, but I had to get the employees involved. So I said, hey, here's the idea. And they have leaned in so well. Like they dove in, they start figuring out with me how we're going to do this. And they all feel, and they all are, and they know this. They know they're a part of the picture. And they know that we're doing this together. And that's the key. We have to help employees to see that we value them and every piece that they bring to the table, and we can't do it without them.
Like what's really coming through for me is this idea of empowerment that you mentioned at the start, that it's really important to empower people to be able to live up to their full potential and setting that vision, but exactly as you described, like having it half-baked. So you don't have, like, this is where we're going, but we need help in the processes and in the steps, and how do we actually get there? How do we turn this vision into a reality? I'm always thinking like that there are people who are really great visionaries and setting that big picture who maybe struggle with the detail piece, and there's other people who are really great at the detail and the task oriented and minute things that need to be executed in order to turn the vision into a reality. Would you kind of agree in your experience?
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah. In fact, there's a fable. It might be true, it might not be true, but about President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, walking through NASA and talking to the janitor. And he asked the janitor what he was doing, and he said, "Well, I'm helping put a man on the moon." Yeah. And so that's the concept. And there's still leaders. Well, let me take that back. There are still people out there who think every employee is just replaceable, and that people are, I can get another one for less, that costs less and can do your job better. Yeah. So first of all, those are not leaders. They're managers. Yeah. And second, it's not going to work with the young generation. They're not going to work for you. And you're never going to get the level of commitment, and what you're going to get is people that are almost I heard the other day a great term, it's like hostile obedience or something like that. Okay. Yeah. It's like, okay, fine, I'll do it your way. You don't get their brains, you don't get their hearts, you don't get, and they're just waiting to get off work so they can go live the rest of their real life. Yeah. I want to be a part of their real life. I want them to, I care about my employees. They care about me. Like, we know each other. Yeah. And we're doing this life together. We might as well be friends and get to know each other. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I suppose my whole ethos is you spend so much time at work that you want to create this happier working environment so that people individually feel fulfilled. They feel like they're being challenged. They feel like they're living their purpose in life. And from an organizational perspective, exactly that you don't just have, I always think of this as a pair of hands. You don't just have someone's pair of hands. We've moved beyond that. We're not working in factories. The majority of workers would be knowledge-based workers. So what you want to do is engage people's brains and then engage their hearts as well. So they have that level of commitment and they want to stay in your organization. Absolutely. But even if it's a factory worker, even if they're the person taking out the trash, we need them. Yeah. We absolutely need them. Yeah. And so, I mean, if the trash needs to be taken out, we have to have someone to do it. Yes, absolutely. So, and if you're a big company, that's a big job. Yes. And we just have to value every person. Yeah. And I think the mistake is the mindset of the leader that doesn't value every person. Okay. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I love that. Pretty cool. I missed you there. I think you're kind of breaking up a little bit. One sec. Do we want to do? Okay, I'm turning off some Wi-Fi here. Hopefully, give us some bandwidth. Okay, great. Sorry, I missed you there for a few seconds. Okay, all right. Well, maybe cut that out where I'm trying to get on the Wi-Fi. Yeah. But yeah, so is it okay if I share a couple of more trends?
Yes, I'd love to hear more trends. Yes, please. Yeah.
I think these are really cool. All right, so um, another big trend was that besides the strategic and visionary leadership, obviously the gender and racial equality is a big trend, and that will continue.
Yeah.
And in fact, we've lost some ground. So I don't know that we've lost ground in racial equality. I think that didn't get as hit by the pandemic. It could, maybe it did. I know in gender equality, they're calling it the she session.
Oh,
We have
yes.
really
Yeah, I've heard
taken
that
a
term.
step
Yeah,
back
yeah,
for females, for
yeah,
women. And so, this is going to be something we're going to have to continue to put focus on going forward. And I do think companies are. I think some of the bigger leaders around the world are insisting. Thank goodness they're insisting. The NASDAQ, the Blackstone, or BlackRock, and like people like Paul Pullman, who ran Unilever. These
yeah,
people are making a huge difference because they're insisting. And we have to insist. And, I was talking the other day about with another person, Steve Bowman, about women. And, I'll just throw this out there, women, we vote with our pocketbooks. If they're not going to put a person on the board, why are we shopping at their places?
yeah,
They're not going to put a woman on the board. They're not going to put diversity on their board. Why are we shopping there?
yeah,
Let's stop shopping. Let's stop buying. Because we can make a difference ourselves. But there are a lot of people doing that, and we can continue to make a difference. So I think that's going to continue to be a huge trend. The other one that I think is really big, whether development is big, we have to develop our people. We're not going to be able to get them again if we don't develop them
yeah,
and empower them. I mean, this is a big part of this great resignation. Like, they're not going to go unless your company has a purpose, you care about your people, and you're willing to grow and develop them. They're just not going to come. They're going to go somewhere else. And so we want to capture the talent. But here's a big one for leaders. We now need leaders who can lead from crisis to crisis. We are seeing that this, like COVID, and then the weathers, and the weather keeps changing. Now the prices keep changing. Now the supply keep change. It is crisis after crisis, and we see no end in sight. So we have to get good at leading from crisis to crisis, and we have to have leaders who can do that. And it's hard because you get tired. I feel really bad for healthcare workers right now.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
healthcare leaders too.
Yeah,
Because they're exhausted.
yeah,
And this is not going away.
yeah, yeah.
So but we have to have leaders who can do it.
Yeah. And what skills do you think are different for a leader who excels at leading from crisis to crisis versus someone who struggles a little bit more with that?
For one, flexibility, adaptability, so this leading through change, and resilience is huge. They need to keep themselves in shape. And what I mean by that is fit. I'm not talking about weight or anything like that. I'm just talking about being fit, healthy, try to get you some sleep. This is something I personally need to improve on, is have enough rest. But, we have to challenge ourselves that you can't lead from crisis to crisis if you don't take care of yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like they say, you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's about looking after yourself first before you can reach out and look after other people. Are there any other trends, Bonnie, that you would like to talk about today?
Well, I would like to go a little deeper into this leading through change and leading through from crisis to crisis, because one of the things we talk about is an adaptive stance. So in an adaptive stance, I used to play basketball and I was a guard. And so we learned to be in a stance where I could move any direction.
Yeah.
And I'm always ready, so that no matter where the person with the ball wanted to go, I was ready to go that way. So what I teach with leaders, and especially with this leading from crisis to crisis, is we have to be in an adaptive stance. So no matter what comes at us, we're ready to pivot.
Yeah.
And go whichever direction we need to go. And so, that I think is going to be crucial for leadership going forward. And there are people who do really struggle with change.
Yeah.
There are lots of people who struggle with change. And I would encourage you to reframe yourself, like put a new frame around change and become good at it.
Yeah.
Choose to be good at change.
Yeah.
Choose to be good at crucial conversations.
Yes.
Choose to be good at doing those things that are required of leadership today. And it may be naturally hard for you, but it's a learnable skill.
I think that's one of the crucial things, really, isn't it? That it is, most of these skills, they might not come naturally to you, but you can actually learn them, and you need to do what is required to operate at the level that you're at. And so if it requires having those crucial conversations, delivering constructive feedback to people, having tough conversations with people, managing upwards, managing downwards, all of that, like if that's required of the role, then you need to be able to fulfill that.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting what you're saying about what's required, and this idea, like I'm a huge believer. So when you spoke about culture earlier, it's about the difference, I suppose, between being able to teach someone, but you can't teach someone to have new values or to behave in a new way necessarily that deviates from their natural way of behaving according to their values. Any kind of thoughts or insights to share on that? So what I'm thinking is, you have these core values, and it's, from my perspective, much better to hire people whose values align with your own values, and then you can teach them the skills that are required to perform in the role.
Yes, values are a big deal. In fact, we're building an assessment right now, and I'm working on the values piece about that, because you do want to get into an organization that aligns with your values.
Yeah.
But let me just say this: if you value not changing, you should change your values. It's not going to work.
Yes.
Going forward in the workplace.
Yeah.
So there are people who value that. We just want to have the same every day. And so I'm just going to challenge you. That probably needs to change.
And
but if you value authenticity or a fast pace or any of all those kinds of different values, then of course we want you to be aligned.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I had this conversation. We had an entire podcast episode all about values, and in the conversation we talked about having the value of being avoiding conflict. So that is one of your core values, is to completely avoid any conflict that's going on, which of course does not really translate very well into the business world, in the sense that you need to be able to have that positive conflict rather than completely shying away from conflict altogether. You need to be able to have those tough conversations, especially as you progress in your career.
Absolutely. The best leaders become really good at difficult conversations. I told myself early on, when I saw how important that skill was, that I would learn to do it well. And, I certainly didn't know how to do it well when I first started.
Yeah.
And so it's been a study. It will be a lifelong study.
Yeah.
I will, continue to practice. But I try to be really good at having hard conversations. And the people who are really good at it often end up in the leadership positions. So I'll give you an example. We do a lot of work with boards. And the ones who can have the difficult conversations are the ones who end up being the chairs. They're the chair of the whole board, or they're the chair of the comp committee. And, if you're chair of comp committee or chair of the whole board, you're going to have those difficult conversations with the CEO if necessary, or senior management. And so, I run this network, which I can tell you about too, of women on boards. And we encourage them, like, don't just get it on the board, get the chair position.
Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. Love that. Aim high, aim for the best.
Yes, keep going, get the power.
Yeah. Get in and keep going. And I ran a webinar, as mentioned before we started recording last night, 3 steps to overcoming imposter syndrome. And in it, one of the participants shared that she wanted to get to a director level within her organization, and she was having all of these things going on in her head where it's like, and this is why I can't, and I keep accepting these things, and they offer me less money than I want, and I say yes anyway, and it's kind of a boundaries thing. But it was really interesting to hear that. So this is what she wants, but she's actually accepting less. She's saying yes to less than what she actually wants to achieve. So it's really interesting. Just circling back to this idea of having crucial conversations, do you have any insights or any tips that you'd like to share? You're saying it's kind of a lifelong journey for you, and it's something that you're going to continue to work on. But if someone who is starting out and they've found themselves in a position where they have to start having those difficult conversations, like any tips on how to get started?
Absolutely. So the first tip is read the book, Crucial Conversations.
Yes, I love that book. Yes. Yeah.
I met one of the authors for dinner years ago in Oklahoma City. And when you look up the book, to make sure you get the right one, the first author is Carrie Patterson.
Yeah.
And so it's called Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Just a couple of tips in that book that I use a lot are, let me just tell you the story that's going on in my head.
Okay.
And, and the way I say it is, can I throw it out there and we'll sort it out when it gets there? Because I don't know, I'll say stuff like, I'm not sure how to say this, and so, I mean, not always, but sometimes if it's really messy, I'll say it like that. And
okay.
That works really well in like a personal relationship.
Yeah.
Like, I need to talk to you and I don't know how to say it. Can I just throw it out there? Because then that person's like, oh, I'm going to help you get this out.
Yeah.
They know you need help. So that's a good one. And then, first of all, you can say almost anything you have to say, and you can say it in a kind way.
Yeah.
For example, let's say you have to let someone go. Then I might say, listen, we've been working on this for a while now. I'm you. So I'm friend to find and here's what I can give you a reference on, and I'll do that, and I'll help. So let's work together. And there's no need for it to be a mean thing, a hard thing.
Yeah.
Like, we can do this and help them get in the right place.
Yeah. I think like one of the things that I remember from that is it's the emotion of it, isn't it? And it's like,
yes.
It's a really highly emotional. If you're on the receiving end of that conversation, you're going to be really, really upset, and you might not have seen it coming. And it's about being empathetic, but also removing the emotion from, if someone's getting upset, then it's not kind of going to their level. It's maintaining that level of calm and being empathetic towards it, but at the same time taking the emotion out.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to do it, because it's like one of the first things I encourage people to do, again, when I'm coaching, is to move off their poor performers. And that doesn't mean they're a poor performer, period. That means they're not in the right job.
Yeah.
So, I always look at people as having somewhere that they can be an A player.
Yeah.
And I love nothing more than to help them find it. And it may not be with my company, but it doesn't have to be harsh. And I didn't know that when I first started, and, did some early on letting go of employees that I didn't do well, and wish I could do that over again. But in other words, I just moved them off. I didn't try to help them. I didn't give them enough window. But today, I've had to move off several people who either were right and then we changed the company and then it wasn't right.
Yeah.
Or, for whatever reason, just ended up was not going the right way. And we're still friends. They still follow me. We still stay connected. They are in good places.
This is it. And if you can have a former employee as an advocate for your company, I think you're winning then.
Yes, yeah. I agree completely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. Bonnie, are there any other insights you would like to share with us today? If you want to maybe share about the book, anything else that you want to
we
share?
have a new book, right? I told you about Leading with Vision. So that's been out for a little while. It's a great book. If you're a professor, it's a great leadership book, and like for your classes, because very few people there's hardly anything out there on how to do visionary leadership,
right?
Which is why we wrote it.
Yeah.
So, but I go to the publisher right before COVID, and I said, here's a couple of ideas I have for the next book. And I really thought that they had decided they didn't want either one of them. And then they came back, months later, I said, hey, it looks like maybe you're not interested. And I'm going to go ahead and pitch it to somebody else. And so they were like, no, we're interested. We got furloughed.
Okay.
So it's because of COVID.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the book that we wrote is, it's called Courage to Advance. It just came out in North America on October 19th. It will come out rest of world on December 10th, and the Audible will come out December 10th. And it's published by Hachette under the Nicholas Brealey imprint. And this book is it has 5 leadership competencies told through storytelling.
Okay, yeah.
And the stories are of 36 of the women in my Women Execs on Boards network. But it's not just for women, it's for men and women. The reason that we did it this way, though, is because we wanted, that's the way I pitched it, because this is a very global network. So basically, in 2016, I went through the Harvard Women on Boards program. It's like Women on Board Succeeding as a Corporate Director. And after that, about a year and a half after that, there was another class had gone through. I was like, we have to formalize. We were trying to stay together informally.
Yeah.
And we decided we needed to formalize. And so I went to another woman, Lisa Pent. I said, Lisa, what do you think about a formal network? And she was like, I think it's good, because she'd kind of been keeping us together through phone calls. And so we did it. And today we have over 200 members from 23 countries. Wow. Very high level women, very successful, but they are not Ivy League leaders.
Yeah.
Yes, we have some, but most just worked their butts off to get there.
Yeah.
And they were sent by companies, or they paid themselves. And this is executive education. It wasn't like your undergrad. So hardworking, high level women. And we have women on big boards, Boeing, Nike, wow. All kinds of great big boards, and all over the world. But the stories in the book are around vulnerability, courage, adaptability, sense making, and one more. I'm blanking at this for a second. Resiliency. Duh. That's the biggest theme altogether. So the stories are broken up into those 5 categories, but it's every woman tells their highest level of achievement so far. They're one of the hardest things they've ever been through on their path, and how they got through it. And then they give advice directly to the reader.
Brilliant.
And these are amazing stories, and you will be inspired.
Yeah.
So we would love for people to buy the book. We give talks. I mean, it can not just be me, the women in the group, and not just the 36, but the whole 200.
Yeah.
Most of us are willing to talk and give panels and talk about this, because we want to inspire other people. We also, the publisher worked with us. We pushed to get it out as fast as possible. And the reason was because so many people were just really struggling through COVID. They needed some inspiration.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it sounds like an incredible inspirational book. I love when books have that human aspect to it. So it's not just about the success, but it's a story of how someone got successful, but it's also the challenges that they encountered along the way. And
it's very human. Yeah. You will see, like, you'll be surprised, shocked, heart-wrenching at times.
Yeah.
And then you're just like so proud of them.
Yeah.
And that for making it through such struggles.
Yeah.
And one of the things we say right at the end of the book is, if you're out there and you're struggling, just know that all of us, we're here cheering you on.
Brilliant. I love that. I think people need more of that, especially women. You need cheerleaders around you. You don't need, there's this kind of sense that some women are there to knock each other down and to tear each other down, whereas what we really should be doing is putting our hands down and lifting other people up, and really supporting each other. Yeah.
And the men, I do want to say that, like I said, the book is for men and women.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is because there's clear theme of discrimination. I would say every woman in our network has had discrimination at some level.
Yeah.
Whether at both, we're very diverse. So a lot of racial discrimination, a lot of ethnic discrimination, and then certainly gender discrimination. But almost every woman has also had a male who championed them.
Okay, brilliant.
And so we need men, and we cannot do this. I mean, I saw an article or something about it the other day. It's like, women can't do it alone. We need you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a couple of different things popping up for me. The allyship from men and getting that support and getting men into those women's networks in organizations to rally and to support women, but also more directly in a mentoring role and having a man as a mentor to maybe challenge the perspective that a woman has when she's going for a promotion, when she's having difficulties in her role, creating boundaries, all of that kind of stuff. Like maybe a man might approach it slightly differently and can offer a new perspective around that, but also challenge to break beyond the limitations that oftentimes we put on ourselves.
Yes, and I love the mentoring. I think it was inadvertently mentored by doing all this coaching because I saw how they thought.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. We back up way too soon.
Yeah.
Like, if there's a man and a woman going for CEO, that man, they're going all the way.
Yeah.
They're going to fight to the bitter end to get that job and or positive end, I should say. The women will say, oh, I can work for you. You can work for me, right? I can work for you. You can work for me. No problem. The man's like, yeah, sure.
Okay.
And then,
okay.
While they're loading their guns behind their back, they're like, I'm getting that job.
Yeah.
And we'll be friends later, but first I'm going to get the job.
Okay.
So, what I tell the women is like, you go get that job.
Yes.
Then you can be friends.
Yeah. So it's perseverance, and it's really just believing in yourself and going for it, and
competition.
Yeah.
Value the competition, get in the seats, then you can change it. Women lead differently, but you can't change the way the leadership goes until you're in the seat. So that's one thing. The other thing is Ben can go in a second step beyond mentoring and be a champion. And a champion means I'm beyond, am I challenging your thinking and giving you ways to think differently, is to reach down, grab their hand and pull them up into higher level positions and onto board seats. It's, or just telling people like this person would be great on this board or great in this executive position.
Yeah.
And we have to get those. That's where I see this is my personal mission. I plan to work on this the rest of my life, is to help more women get into senior executive positions and on board seats.
Yeah.
Because we can change a lot of things from those seats.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That seems like a kind of a natural place to end the conversation today, Bonnie. The question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast, what makes you happier at work?
Well, the first thing that makes me happy at work is that when my employees are engaged and happy, like that makes me happy, because then I know that they are doing all that they can to help us get where we are. So I'd say that's probably my number one thing. The second thing, you can't see it, but I happen to be sitting in my corner office, which is on my own 9 acres, looking at the pond. Wow. And so having an environment, I've seen some of the most beautiful offices in the world, even recently in New York City. And I wouldn't trade one of them for this view I have right here.
Yeah, love that. Love that approach. And if people want to connect with you, if they want to find out more about the book, about the work that you do, what's the best way that they can reach out?
Please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best place to connect, and I will accept your connection. Come and join a conversation. We'd love to have you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today. I so enjoyed that conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.